So let me go to my first screen here and let's remind ourselves of this screen. Because as I've always said, data science is not Python, it's not a tool, it's not, math. Data science is a process, right? Because that's how you actually treat it as a science, right? You're not really doing a science unless you're following a methodology, a series of steps, right? A process. So this here has been our guiding light for for basically everything we've done, right? So as we've started before in other instances, can someone tell me what stage we're at? What stage are we at here in the entire methodology process? So this is time for the first chance for participation in the chat. What step do you think we're at in terms of this project? Right? I've already kind of given hints about that, when I talked about the overview, right? But what stage do you guys think we're at for the overall project? How do you guys see the project? Let me know what you think. Where are we? Where are we in this entire methodology? What do you guys think? Lakshmi is saying model deployment. Okay. Anybody else? You can also just choose to agree with someone, somebody who's already given an answer. But Lakshmi says that we are down here in the deploy model stage. Anybody else want to give their view? Yassine says, I think the technical part of the project is done. What's left to present is the results. Okay. Denelson says result interpretation and visualization. Okay. Osama says deliver the project to stakeholders. Okay. Anybody else? Last call for answers. We've gotten some great answers. So thank you to all of you who volunteered an answer. Joseph says result interpretation. Okay. Last call for answers. I think we've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 really good answers. And I think all 5 answers are on the right track. But I am leaning a little bit more towards Yassine and Osama's answer. Manoj says agree with Osama. Yeah. I think I'm leaning a little bit towards that you could make the argument. You could make the legitimate argument to say, hey, we're kind of done. The methodology steps are kind of done. It's not incorrect to say the deploy model, but we're really more about deploying the project itself, right? We're really more about pushing it out the door and saying, hey, client, hey, Mr. Client, we have met our obligations and we are ready to push this out, right? Osama says, create an API. Osama, you're not incorrect. I think that creating an API kinda sorta goes a little bit beyond the scope of what I want to cover in this series, but I will be covering APIs in a separate Sunday series. Okay, so stay tuned for that. But you're not incorrect. You're not incorrect, Osama. Okay? But, going with Osama's and Yassine's previous answer, you could say that we are done here. But the other answers are not necessarily incorrect, right? Yeah, Lakshmi, you took the words out of my mouth, right? When you say deploy the project, or I know a couple other people said the results interpretation, that's still part of what we're going to do today, right? Because we don't just send the code or tell the client we're done without giving them some sort of documentation, right? And as I've always mentioned to you guys, work on your own projects and then write articles based on the results. And then when you write those articles, focus on the business impact, right? If you want to say that's part of model deployment, I'm on board with that, right? I agree with that because you're really kind of not done until you do that. And that document with those 3 elements is what we're going to focus on today, right? We got to send our clients something that also shows the business impact, right? Now, you're going to have to bear with me here because as I've told you all before, I sometimes have to move things a little bit faster than they would in real life because, just for the sake of the series, right? And I'm going to make up some numbers today. But again, that's all for the sake of the series. But the lesson I want you all to walk away with are the different elements that you need to include in these documents, right? So we're going to get to that. But what I also want to do is I want to quickly review what we covered last week. Because I know that last week was a lot of information. So I want to remind all of us of that information before we go ahead and start talking about what that final document looks like. So very quickly, we're going to go through all of the slides that we did last week because some of you have mentioned the deployment side, and this is and that's what we basically did last week, right? So we know that we have version 1.0 of our deliverable, right? And we know that it's not, I repeat, not the model training code. We wrote code specifically for the prediction cycles of the project, which is important, right? Because that's ultimately what we're expected to deliver. The client wants to be able to use this in the future. They don't want to rebuild the model. That's our job. But the prediction side is definitely something that they want to benefit from, right? The challenge is that we still have everything running locally, which is okay for continuing work, but you're not going to deploy something that runs on your local machine, right? So we talked about these different steps that we need to do, right? What is the server we're going to use? What are the steps we need to do to prepare that server? How can we set up a virtual environment? How can we duplicate the virtual environment that we're already using? So on and so forth. And we walked through all of those steps last week. And those steps are basically something that we would want to do in a tiered environment, right? What's going to be our local development? What's going to be our team server? What's going to be our user acceptance or staging server? And then what does our production server look like, right? We talked about how we have to deploy our model across all of these servers because these are ultimately the architecture, the IT architecture that we need in order to have a successful deployment and a successful environment that lets us continue development, right? Because there's going to be a version 1.5, a version 2.0, a version 3.0 of everything we've done, right? So this type of architecture sets us up for that, right? I'm oversimplifying the architecture diagram here, but this is a pretty good meta view of what they'll look like in real life for you. After that, we talked about kind of like this mishmash of items that I wanted to get across to you. I think I said a potpourri of items, right? Where this is also when source control becomes really important, right? This is also when your QA process might kick in. This is also when a model review process might kick in, right? Everything else we've been doing didn't really matter because it was all local, right? It was just local development. We did quite a few explorations, right? But, when you start pushing out to servers, a lot more people get involved, a lot more policy gets involved. So these are things you have to know are coming because you have to account for them in your timelines also, right? We talked about the timelines about how, well, if your company has an overall policy of not deploying in December, which is a common thing, Well, now you got to be ready for November. Well, your IT people are going to want your code ahead of time so that they can do their own deployment tests. Okay, well, now you're 3 weeks ahead of time. And your MRM people need at least a month. Okay, well, that's another month. So now you're looking at being ready in September for anything you want to deploy at the quote unquote end of the year, right? So knowing all of those things ahead of time is super important for your planning and your overall development time, right? You can't say, oh, well, I have an entire year to work on this. Well, no, that year is only 8 months because you got to be ready to ship it for testing and review and all that other stuff, right? So 12 months becomes 8 months all of a sudden, and that's not always convenient, right? So you got to know about these things. Data security also becomes a heightened concern. Maybe in development you were only working on a subset of data. Maybe you were working on dummy data, right? That's on synthetic data. That's common too, right? So what happens when you move to production data, when you have a lot more data, or when you have live data versus data that's warehoused? That's a big concern, right? And then also, this is the time to show off, right? This is the time when you might have more presentations, and you're going to have presentations to other teams, to your stakeholders, and also to your executives, right? Each one of those has a different audience, so it's a different level of presentation. How you carry yourself, how you introduce yourself, how you cater to the audience, super important at that stage, right? And that's not technical, right? That's not that's not the time to be the math robot or the code robot. That's the time to be the salesman, the showman when it comes to data science, right? Some people are terrible at that. Some people are good at that. It just depends. If you know you're not so great at that, then that's a skill you have to practice, because if you don't have that skill, there will be a cap to your advancement in your overall career, right? Maybe not now, but 5-10 years down the line, when you want to do bigger and better things in your career, your ability to communicate your work, run those presentations, understand your audience, will be the deciding factors for how far you get along in your career, right? So I have to mention that because it's super, super important in your career. All right, so from there, we talked about how we did this on DigitalOcean. We talked about setting up the virtual environments with Conda, and then that kind of led into the actual technical part of what we talked about last week, right? Okay, so that brings us to present day. That brings us to the final client delivery. So we know that we need a document, right? We're done. We did it. We have a model that's on a server. So we've done a lot of explorations, right? We've done a lot of work. So we got to be proud of that. We got to publish that out. We got to tell people what we did. How did we get to this point, right? So what is the article of our journey? What is the story of our journey? And then we got to send that off to the client. So here's some things that I want us to consider in the document. If you want to consider this the overall structure of the document, it's pretty close to that. I've tried to include the bullet points in an order that makes sense for us, in an order that makes sense for the story that we're trying to tell, right? The story that we're trying to convey to the client. So what was the challenge in front of us? What is it that our project set out to do? What was our general approach, right? What did we consider? What did we actually choose? What was the rationale for that choice? Right? Because you gotta tell the story. You can't tell the story by not talking about the items that you tried and failed, right? It's totally okay to talk about your failures, or to talk about why didn't we do this versus another item, right? That's totally okay. The scientific mind always considers multiple options. There's never one single option, right? If you have one single option in data science and you're doing data science wrong, right? Something has gone wrong in your process. So I want to show that. What did we consider? What did we choose? And what was the rationale for that choice? It's important things to do that, right? Sorry, I think, did I go twice? Okay. What are some of the findings from the approach that we found, that we chose? What are some of our findings? In other words, the results, right? What do we need to consider for deployment? We need to kind of maybe not provide instructions. This isn't intended to be a technical manual, but what is it that we need to consider for deployment? What are some of the risks with the product and the approach that we chose, right? What would, I've spoken to you guys before about this. One of the best courses I ever took, I was in high school actually. I was in high school, but I attended classes at a community college. I took this course on writing, and I think it was called, more specifically, I think it was persuasive writing. And the lady who taught it was very cool, really knowledgeable, really enjoyed my class with her. And she said something that stuck with me. She said about how a smart paper, an intelligent paper, always presents the counter argument. By you presenting the counter argument to what you're trying to persuade, it makes your argument stronger, right? So and the question is, what would a critic say about your approach? What would a critic say about your paper? And then you write that criticism, and then you address that criticism, right? So we're going to do that here because I think that's also valuable in science, right? What is the approach you chose? What is the rationale you approach? What are the holes in your rationale, and how do you address the holes in your rationale? Right? Super strong if you're able to write in that pattern. So we're going to present some of those counter arguments, right? And then what are some of the potential benefits of the product? Like, why would you want to use this, right? The client's already motivated to use it, but we can add some of our own items based on kind of lessons learned, right? I've also mentioned in the past that any good white paper, report, article, whatever, always says how you can carry the work forward. Remember, publishing is part of the scientific process, right? You don't publish for yourself, for your resume, for other things. You publish to help the scientific community. That's the whole point of publishing. So a well-established article or publication is intended to say, here, science community, here's what I found. And if you want to build on this, here's where I would go with it, or here's some ideas for how to build on it. And in theory, another team, another person out there will pick it up and build upon your work, right? So what are the things that can be done in the future? From a business perspective, from a client perspective, we also have to help them on how you need to maintain the project in the future, right? As we've said before, data is not static. Models shouldn't be static, right? We should be open to revisiting our models. So how often are we doing that? I mean, our client's not going to know that. We need to make a recommendation, right? So let's do that. Let's include that in our write-up. And then finally, everything we've done here has been AI first, right? That was one of the premises I've had for really all the series we've done. So we're not going to necessarily write the report. We're going to prompt ChatGPT to help us write the report, right? Because that's the most effective, quickest way to do this. That's kind of the whole point, right? So we're going to guide. We've created a meta guide for ourselves, right? Each of these bullet points is something that I want to see in our final article, our final deliverable. So we're going to use that guide to be creative in our prompts, but ultimately the delivery text, the document text, will be something that we generate with ChatGPT, right? We could sit here and generate it ourselves, right? Nothing wrong with that. And I'm pretty sure I did that in another piece of content. But I've always said, right, the data scientists of the future is going to be heavily aided by AI. And this is no different. The delivery side is no different, right? So we're going to use that, right? We're going to go ahead and keep on using ChatGPT as our guide. So I'm pretty sure this is my last slide. Yeah, it is. All right. So I'm ready to start piecing this document together. Are there any questions or any comments? You guys still with me? Let me know. You know, we're gonna cover a lot here, but we're gonna try to take it step by step as far as guiding ChatGPT. But let me know. You know, is this making sense? You guys still with me? Let me know. Any questions? Now is a good time for it. Anybody who's joining us late wants to say hello. Now is a good time for it. But otherwise, I think we're ready to switch over to our ChatGPT interface. I want to go back, before we do that, I want to go back to that first slide and think about, you know, this is the first slide. So I want to make sure that we're addressing this bullet point by bullet point, right? And think about, okay, what was the challenge in front of us and what was our general approach, right? So we're going to use that to use our own creative minds as the human in the loop to be able to guide ChatGPT, right? All right, so Maniam, Osama, okay, so everybody's on board. Cool. Okay, thanks so much, guys. Appreciate that feedback. So if you guys, I'm gonna, you know, create the prompts as I see them. But if you guys want to give me some feedback on the prompts, feel free to interrupt. Feel free to put something in the chat. But I think that we need to kind of guide ChatGPT. So the way I see this in my mind is that we are going to build the document, but we're going to build it kind of like step by step. I want to build it kind of like section by section or paragraph by paragraph. You know, we could certainly write a long prompt and have ChatGPT just run with it. But my gut tells me that's not the best way. My gut tells me that's just not, it's too risky, right? I kind of want to piece it step by step. That also allows us to make edits or to make prompt changes as we go along, right? And I think that's important too, right? So that's the approach I want to take. And the first bullet is, what was the challenge in front of us? Okay. So here's a general challenge. The general challenge right now is that we got to give ChatGPT proper background. We got to give it proper context on what it is that we've done, right? So I want to make sure that we set ourselves up for success, set up ChatGPT for success by providing a background on us and providing a background on the document that we need, right? So let me set some of that up. Again, I'm open to your thoughts. I'm open to your views on the prompts. So feel free to stop me, put them in the chat. Let me know. If you need me to zoom the prompt a little more, let me know. All right, so just piecing this together. I started off by describing the team, but that's actually a mistake. I think I want to start off by describing our client. And I think we already said that we decided early on that our client was a private equity firm. We've always said that this is basically an alpha farming effort, right? So I want to make sure I include that in the prompt also. Use it to grant alpha farming. All right, I think we might be okay with this first prompt. Can I make this bigger? I think I can if it... Okay, so that prompt, that's going to help you see it a little bit better, right? So what do you guys think? I think that this prompt gives enough background and it establishes the way we want to work with ChatGPT, because I think all of us have had that experience where, you know, not just ChatGPT, but some of the LLMs can be over verbose, right? So this is my attempt to kind of put a rein on that and say, wait a minute, we're going to go step by step. We're going to take, you know, we're going to build this document one paragraph at a time. Here's the first paragraph, and here's the background on the entire project, right? Are you guys okay with this prompt? Do you want to make any modifications? Did I forget anything? Right? That's possible that I forgot something. So what do you guys think? Give me some feedback there. Are you on board with this? Are you not on board with this? What do you think? I think we might be okay with this. But let me know. It's completely possible I forgot something, right? Isaac, welcome. I think it's your first time, so thank you so much, Isaac. Isaac says, I think it's okay. All right, cool. You can also just choose to agree with Isaac, but I think this will get us started. Anybody else? Did I forget anything, guys? Anybody see anything I forgot? We can always add things later, right? But for initial paragraph to describe our work, our bigger setup, I guess you could say, I think we're okay with this. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we come up with, right? Let me copy this. Yeah, so let's go ahead and run this. Okay. So ChatGPT has said, we hope this message finds you well. Been a pleasure collaborating with the team in the course project. Is that results of our effort? Private equity firm with data science. Challenge with technical precision, but also deep understanding the dynamics of financial markets and investment strategies. Yeah. All right, so give me a 1 in the chat if you're happy with this output. Give me a 0 if you think, you know, there's room for improvement here. But I think this has given us a reasonable result. So give me a 1 in the chat if you're okay with the result that ChatGPT gave us. Give me a 0 If you think we can refine this, let me know. A 1 if we're good, a 0 if we're not good. Priam says, I think the prompt is sufficient to start with. I think so too, Priam, right? As a starting point, just to kind of get the ball rolling, get the context going for ChatGPT. Because remember, guys, I'll speak in that a little bit. But just to get us going, I think it's a reasonable prompt, and I think it's a reasonable answer it gave us. So Osama says, Osama is on board with this answer. He gives a 1. Denelson said, "Is it supposed to look like an email a little?" Yes, Denelson. I'm okay with the formality that ChatGPT has chosen here. We can always adjust that. You probably wouldn't publish that out if you wrote a LinkedIn article about that. You'd probably start off a little bit different. But for the purposes of addressing our client and, kind of keeping it business oriented, I'm okay with the tone that ChatGPT has chosen here. Okay. So Manoj is on board with this. Joseph's on board with this. Yassine is good with this. Okay. So I think we're good too, right? So going back to our guiding document, what was our general approach? What did we consider? What did we choose? What was the rationale for that choice? Right? Okay, let's hold on a second here. Joseph says, the only thing I'm not liking is the last sentence. So Joseph does not like this challenge required not only technical precision, but also a deep understanding of the dynamics of financial markets and investment strategies. So Joseph, you're welcome to share your rationale, Joseph. If I'm being honest, the last sentence is kind of my favorite part. I think ChatGPT did a pretty good job with it. But I'm open to being wrong. So guys, this is the sentence in question. I kind of like it. Is it just me? What do you guys think? Do you guys think this last sentence needs to be adjusted? What do you guys think? I kind of like it. Oh, Joseph, if you're willing to share, let me know what part of the document or the sentence is not sitting right with you. Isaac says, I think it described the requirement for the project. Yeah. Priam is also voting 1. Yeah. Joseph, I'd love to hear a rationale, or if somebody else wants to agree with Joseph. But so far, Joseph, I think you're alone on this, and that's okay, right? We should be open to different perspectives, right? But if I'm being honest, I kind of like that sentence. You know what? You know why I also like it, Joseph? I like it because it's a good segue to the next paragraph. Because look at what we're going to talk about next. Our next section is, what was our general approach? Okay. Well, in this sentence, we talked about, hey, this was a technical effort. And then that's a great segue to saying, these are some of the technical things we tried, right? So Joseph, I'm open to your rationale. Lakshmi says, for me, we hope this message finds you well is not sounding good. Lakshmi, I'd love to hear your rationale. Now, for everybody in the chat, you guys know that I don't like calling out people, right? I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, because I want everybody to feel comfortable in the chat. So if you feel like sharing a rationale, wonderful. If not, that's totally okay. But we all keep the chat respectful, so don't be afraid. But I'd like to hear your rationale for both Lakshmi and Joseph. Joseph says, I'm not necessarily against what it is saying, just mainly how. For instance, ChatGPT has a way of closing each line of a prompt with "this is." Okay. But is that a bad thing, Joseph? I don't know if that's a bad thing. like stylistically, I can understand that maybe ChatGPT overuses a couple things, but like, is it legitimately wrong though? Let me know. Or coming back to Lakshmi's statements, so Lakshmi is not quite on board with this. So Lakshmi, would you want to drop that? Would you want to substitute something else? What do you think? Isaac says, well, one can paraphrase to sound different. Yeah. I mean, for everybody, keep in mind that we can always make our own edits afterwards, right? We can always use the ChatGPT to be our version 1, and then we come up with version 2, and that's what actually goes out the door, right? We don't have to take ChatGPT wholesale. Now, it's better for us to practice our prompting skills and maybe ask ChatGPT to make adjustments, but, you know, we're not just going to copy and send, right? We can copy and edit and modify and get our boss's approval and get the CEO's approval and all that, and then send it, right? Joseph says, not a bad thing. I think I'm just being picky. I just feel that it's overused. Okay. Well, you know, so Joseph, to your point, the technical team rarely sends out these documents, right? The technical team rarely just says, okay, here's our document. We're going to send it to the client. It usually has to go through legal. It has to go through marketing. It has to go through the managing director, directors, right? So there's an opportunity there for us to stylistically change it, right? Lakshmi says we are addressing a company, so we can drop that. Okay, so Lakshmi is coming back to the first sentence, right? So Lakshmi, I gotta be honest with you. I used to think that. I used to have that same mindset. But as I took more communication courses, as I took more, as I was exposed to more people with better communication skills than I and all that, right? I learned that starting a document, any document, without some sort of a greeting is considered rude, right? No matter who you're writing it for, or the length of the document, or the seriousness or not seriousness of the document, jumping straight into the material is a little bit rude. You know, it's a little bit of a little bit more of an emotionally intelligent way to start your documents by including a greeting. So that's something that I've incorporated over the last, I don't know, 6-7 years of my experience. I didn't always do that. So I'm kind of okay with the way ChatGPT started that message. I think it shows a certain demeanor that you want to bring to your documents, right? Isaac says, I agree, Dennis. Isaac, let me know which portion, right? Because we kind of have two different views here, and that's okay. But let me know what portion you're on board with, Isaac. You know, kind of helps narrow it down. But Lakshmi, if you want to propose an alternative, you know, I'm on board with that. But I'm not sure if I'm on board with dropping it. I think it shows a certain respect that most documents, you know, certainly in the business world, require, right? And we've kind of lost that, right? We've kind of lost that because we're so used to texting, we're so used to DMing, we're so used to WhatsApp messages, where we just don't do that anymore, right? But I kind of like that ChatGPT is sophisticated enough to include that. To me, it kind of elevates the document. It elevates the tone that ChatGPT is starting us off with. Let me know what you guys think about that. You know, I'm open to the rationale. But I kind of give ChatGPT like an A- here. You know, I think it actually did pretty good here. So while you guys think about that, let's go on to the second part. All right, so again, our guiding light is, what was our general approach? What did we consider? What did we choose? What was the rationale for that choice? So here's where I want to go with this. And again, let me know if you need me to zoom anything. All right. So here I'm saying these are the 3 things that we tried. Let me go ahead and send that. That way the prompt will come up. Here's the 3 things that we tried. They were part of our explorations. So for those of you that have been following along in the series, if you remember, we had this whole series of, well, we talked about the ideation, and then we talked about how sometimes you got to take those ideas and you got to explore them a little bit. You got to take 2, 3, 4 days, a week to say, hey, you know, that's a great idea, but can we actually do it? Right? And we did that, right? We did that in the sense that we had this idea. I remember a couple of people suggested the news analysis. Okay, we looked at that. I think it was Manoj that was really behind the efficient frontier theorem. Okay, let's look at that, right? And then I think we looked at the time series analysis, right? Which we've spent a lot of time looking at. So we need to document that, right? That's the story of the journey that we've been on. That's the story that says, hey, we approached this with an open mind and we decided that this was the best way to go about it, right? You can't say that you chose this as your champion model unless you showed who wasn't the champion model, right? You kind of got to show that contrast. So that's what we're trying to do in this section. Okay? So now it's added it to our overall document. And here, what do you guys think? Let's just look at these one by one. So looking at number 1, the first exploration. Our first approach involved analyzing a large corpus of news articles to measure the sentiment by employing natural language processing techniques. We're able to correlate the market movements. Okay, that's not a bad description, right? Is that indeed what we tried to do? I think that's an accurate description of what we tried to do, right? Exploration number 2, efficient frontier theory to design an optimal portfolio by analyzing historical data portfolio theory to identify allocation of assets to maximize returns while minimizing risk. That's accurate. This provided a framework for constructing investment strategies with optimal performance. Okay. Time series analysis. Lastly, we utilize time series to forecast short-term equity prices through advanced models like ARMA and LSTM. We captured temporal patterns and trends within financial data, enabling accurate short-term predictions of equity performance. Okay. What do you guys think? So Manoj, I know that you were one of the ones who suggested Efficient Frontier. Starry Vibes. I'm not sure if Starry Vibes is here today, but I think Starry Vibes initially suggested the sentiment analysis of news, and then the time series was basically all of us coming up with that idea, right? So let me go back to my chat. What do you guys think? So Isaac says, I agree with not getting into a message straight away, but first saying some form of greeting before starting the main message. Yeah, Isaac, I agree with that. And like I said, it's something that I've learned kind of later in my career, but I completely see the value in it, right? You gotta have that social awareness to be able to say, hello, how are you? Hope you're well. Hope your family is well. Here's what I'd like to talk to you about today, so on and so forth, right? It elevates your message. It elevates your tone. So I'm glad you see it that way, Isaac. And I encourage all of you in the chat to start incorporating that in your daily life, in your daily work, even among your friends, among your professors, or even if I'm saying that if you're not already in business, right? But then if you are in business, start incorporating that. It really elevates your message. So something that I've learned to appreciate. Okay, guys. So what about the explorations? Manoj, are you on board with this? Starry Vibes, if you're here, are you on board with this? I think it's done a reasonable job of letting people know, of saying, hey, look, this is what we tried. Remember, we're not trying to get too technical here, right? We don't have to give every single explanation. I appreciate that ChatGPT has done a pretty good job of keeping things at a surface level, right? Because we can get into it with their technical team, with the client's technical team if they want to. But for the technical delivery, this is executive talking to executive, right? That's the level that we're at. So we're trying to meet our audience at that level. If anything, I think that the mention of ARIMA and LSTM down here is a little much, even though it's not a lot, right? But for me, like for that executive audience, maybe it's a little bit too much, but it's borderline. But what do you guys think? How are you guys feeling about these exploration descriptions? Are we all on board with this? I think it's okay. But you guys let me know. My rationale for calling it okay is because, like I said, it kept it surface level, right? It kept it brief, right? It's just 3-4 sentences for each one. So it feels like we're on the right track, but you guys tell me. Are we all on board with this? You guys need it zoomed in? Let me know. Nobody? No feedback? You guys are okay with this? Denelson says, why would we only go a bit more in depth with the explanations when we describe our rationale about our decision, or would it always stay surface level? Still surface level, Denelson, because the rationale for our choice is more about the speed of the model, the accuracy of the model, and the convenience of the model, right? And also, to some degree, the costs of the model, right? So you'll see that as we go along, but it's kind of hard to say, well, what do you mean by surface level, Dennis, right? So when I say surface level in this scenario, it's more about, again, it's who is having this conversation, who is writing this document, and who's receiving it. So for me, this is executive to executive, right? The executive on the consulting side is delivering to the executive on the client side, right? So that's what I mean by surface level. Like, these are the people that don't need to know every single technical detail, but they do need to know what they're getting from you and how to further lead their teams to use it or to set up those meetings, right? Because from here, this is where those guys would say, okay, great, have your technical team talk to my team and we'll go from there, right? Tangential to that, as we've talked before in other situations and we talked about yesterday also, we're a for-profit entity, right? So this is all. So there's definitely a business aspect here of, hey, we have met our requirements from the SOW, so we want to conclude this and continue the payment schedule and keep on running our business, right? So that's the surface level definitions that I'm kind of referring to here. Okay, this is definitely much more business than it is technical. All right. So I hope that helps, Danielson. All right, Manoj says I'm okay with it. Yeah, Manoj, I think it did a pretty good job of describing the efficient frontier theorem, right? Because I especially liked that it mentioned how it defines the most efficient allocation of assets to maximize returns while minimizing risk. That's what it does, right? So ChatGPT added its own knowledge to help us build that out, right? So I think that's super beneficial. I'm really happy that it did that, right? Okay, so if Manoj is on board with that, I think we're good to move on. Dennelson says, yes, thank you for the clarification. Yeah, I hope that helps, Dennelson. So remember, guys, let's think about the audience, right? Because remember, I've always told you guys this in other things, in writing, in your presentations, you got to meet your audience where they're at, right? Your audience is not going to come to you. Your audience is not going to get instantly smarter just because you show some math formulas on the screen, right? You got to meet them where they're at, right? So that's what we're doing here. This is executive to executive. Okay, so Dennelson's also on board with the explanations. So let's go on to the next section, right? So the next section says, what did we say? What did we consider? We have that. What did we choose? So now we talk about our champion model process, right? Well, no, excuse me. I take that back. We're not quite a champion model. We got to say, out of these three explorations, why did we choose this, right? And then what was the rationale for that choice? So we're going to write both of these at the same time in the same section. What did we choose and what was the rationale? So let's talk this out. And I'm putting this out there because I'm going to feed this into the prompt. But I want to give you guys the opportunity to remind me of anything that I forgot here. So sentiment analysis had the challenge of needing an external news feed that we would have to pay for. So that's an added cost. The second reason sentiment analysis was challenging was because it was hard to measure the bias of each article and ensuring that we were able to get a balanced view into all of the articles. Right? So those were the two challenges. Efficient Frontier was very interesting, but one, it was potentially slower because if you remember, that was our lazy loader, right? That's essentially like a Monte Carlo based approach. Nothing wrong with that, but it might not be ideal. The second part that was challenging about Efficient Frontier was, if you remember, another differentiation there was that Efficient Frontier focuses on a portfolio, on a collection of stocks, but it can't tell you about a single stock, right? Again, nothing wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure we made the pretend decision that the client doesn't want, that the client wants individual stocks. So that leaves us with time series. And what was the rationale for that choice? One, we talked about how there's been a lot of advancements in time series. There's this great library by, published by Meta that has very reasonable, very streamlined data requirements, right? It only requires 2 columns, and it provided pretty good results in testing, right? So those are the 2 reasons why we chose what we did. That was the rationale, right? So those are the different elements that I'm thinking about. If you guys want to add to that, please do so. But we're going to use those elements. Again, this is us being the creative human in the loop to create those prompts and then let ChatGPT iterate that out for us in text, right? So let me know in the chat if you want to add things I forgot, but that's the driving portions that I want to use for the prompts that we're going to do, okay? Okay, so I've already finished writing what I want to say about the sentiment analysis, right? So let me open that, right? So here I want to say the new sentiment approach would require a paid service, and that service would add to the cost of the projects, not just in development, but also going forward, right? And then this challenge was also about the articles being biased, potentially being biased, right? We never really kind of came up with a solution for that, right? So now, and if you guys have a different view there, let me know. So now I want to move on to the efficient frontier, right? For efficient frontier, the nature of the... Okay. So that's a pretty good representation of what we just talked about, right? Why didn't we choose these 2, right? So now let's talk about the time series. All right. So I think I've been able to capture what I just told you was like the summary in my head, right? The summary in my head was what I mentioned earlier, right? About the sentiment analysis, the problems there, the efficient frontier, the problems there, and then the time series, the benefits there, right? Now, you'll remember that I stopped myself from calling it the champion model process because this isn't a champion model process. We'll talk about that in another section, potentially the next section. But right now, it's more about the explorations we did, right? Because if you remember, we invested at least 2 sessions of this whole series on that, right? And that's totally standard. Something else they don't teach you in school, right? In school, they tell you what to use. But as a team, you don't know what you can use. You don't know what's viable. You don't know what data is actually accessible out there. So that's part of our journey. So let's document that, right? Let's share that with the client, right? So that's what we're doing here in this prompt. What do you guys think? Any changes? Anything I forgot? Any other explorations that maybe we did that I just forgot about or that I misstated here? Let me know. Give me some feedback in the chat. What do you guys think? I'll be curious to see how ChatGPT kind of like, massages all of this, right? What do you guys think? Osama says, I think the prompt is good. Okay, Osama, I'm glad to hear that from you, Osama, because I know you've consistently attended, I think, all of the Sunday sessions. So somebody like you would definitely, kind of know the history that all of us have been through, right? All right, so let's run it, right? I think we're good here. Let's go ahead and run it. Let's see what ChatGPT comes up with. So I think it's thinking, or editing, I should say. Okay, so it's given us at least a little bit. There it goes. So here's the new stuff. Model selection, time series analysis. After evaluating all 3 approaches, selected time series analysis. I like that. That's a strong start, right? That's planting that flag of saying, hey, this is where we're going with. Sentiment analysis approach promise, required access to paid service when obtaining news articles, and increase the cost of development of creations. Additionally, obtaining unbiased and balanced news articles presenting a challenge accuracy of the model. Okay. Efficient frontier approach, while powerful for portfolio optimization, was not ideal for the scope of the project. Computational demands of the Monte Carlo simulations could lead to slower processing times, which not declining timely insights. Furthermore, efficient frontier models are primarily suited for optimizing portfolios of stocks rather than analyze individual equities. Okay. We ultimately chose something not in the field and its alignment with the project's goals. Specifically, we utilized Profit Library developed by Meta, which incorporates the latest research in time series modeling. Profit's straightforward data requirements, only 2 columns data needed. I made an efficient and practical choice for building robust and accurate predictive models. Okay. So it's going to be kind of hard to see everything that ChatGPT wrote in one screen, but what do you guys think? Joseph says, me too. Okay, so it looks like Joseph is on board with the prompts. So thank you for the feedback, Joseph. What do you guys think here? Let me know what you guys think about this, but I'm kind of noticing a pattern here. I'm a little bit more accustomed to ChatGPT adding more details than what we're seeing in the statements today. I think that we usually see a little bit more massaging or wordsmithing, as they say. I feel that, some of the terms that are being used are a little bit like too close to the way that we're describing it. Like I was hoping that ChatGPT would kind of use its own style and its own modifications to the text. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing per se, but I think it speaks to how careful we need to be in the way we describe the prompts. I think ChatGPT is doing a good job of summarizing our thoughts and displaying it, but it's not necessarily doing good on the generation of new text or of creative text. What do you guys think about that? Are you guys noticing that too? Am I just being picky? Or maybe it's something that we can also modify later, right? We can also say, hey, here's the entire document you wrote, but now give it a more professional tone. Now give it a more serious tone. Now give it a more fun tone, right? Or enthusiastic tone. So maybe that's something we can kind of fix, like, quote unquote later. But what do you guys think? Because I'm seeing like a little bit of regurgitation there in the text. I'm not seeing as much as ChatGPT's involvement in the text. But I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong. What do you guys think? Or if you want, just give me a general feedback on where you think this document is headed. Do you think we're meeting the goals of our stated goals of the document? Also, I talk to you guys a lot about emotional intelligence, right? You don't just learn emotional intelligence one day to the next, right? One of the first things that helps you with emotional intelligence is understanding empathy. And empathy is the ability to see things from other people's side, other people's perspectives. So the question you would ask yourself is, if I'm the receiving end of this document, am I okay with this document? Is it clear to me? Am I happy with this document? Right? So Lalman, welcome. Lalman, I think you're from Nepal. So Lalman, glad you're here. So Lalman is kind of building on it and saying, are we writing to the client directly? Because it mentions the client in the third person. Yeah, you're right, Lalman, it is. That's a great observation. Thanks so much for that. So you know what? I don't know. I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. I think it is. I don't think it's a terrible way to go about it. What do you guys think? Let's give Lalman some feedback in the chat. Because he's making a great observation, right? That it is in the third person. We're treating the client in the third person. The scientist in me says that's okay, right? Because it's good to have that objectivity, right? And also because we could have done this project for any client, right? It's not specific to a client, right? But there is something to be said for addressing them a little bit differently. What do you guys think? Let me know. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's a great observation, Lalman. Thanks for that. So while you guys think about that, I'm gonna flip back here. So, okay, so we talked about the rationale already. So we basically have met all of the goals on this sheet, right? All of these bullet points have been met. What's next? So the next is, what are some of our findings? And this is where we talk about the champion model process. Because we've already said, okay, here's a direction we want to go in. And then here's why we know that direction works. Right? And then in the next section, we're going to treat that as its own section, right? So we can say, hey, look, we had these 3 explorations. We chose one of them. And of that one, here's the additional steps we took to help us with that. That's pretty good, right? We're taking the client, we're taking the reader by the hand, and we're guiding them throughout the document, throughout the process. That's good, right? So let me start hacking out that prompt while you guys think about Lallman's question about the third person and, kind of how we're addressing the client. So here is also a good way to say, this is where we're getting the data. It's free, it's reliable, and the code to obtain it and the data pipeline for it is fairly straightforward, right? And we also want to mention the champion model process, right? Not just because it sounds good, but also because it's an accepted way of how to do these in data science, right? Every team should be able to walk you through their champion model process. So here, I want to talk about the hyperparameter search, right? Because the hyperparameter search is essentially your champion model process, or it's champion model search, right? So we can provide a couple of specifics here. If you remember, in our code, we had 10 different hyperparameters that we could set, right? And then with each one of those hyperparameters, we could set different values. And then that basically determines the scope of your experiments, right? Because, it becomes a permutation of values that you're trying, right? So now we can say we tried 10 different hyperparameters with Okay. All right. So we talk about the data pipeline, right? And then we also talk about the champion model search and the hyperparameters. We talk about how we had 10 different hyperparameters. We try a range of values. which is a large permutation. So that gives us tens of thousands of unique permutations, but each permutation really represents a data experiment. So we can call them a data experiment, and that leads to us finding a champion model, right? But then what is a champion model, right? Like, how are we defining that? If you remember, we said that we always need to have like a metric that we're using as our baseline, right? So let's talk about that, right? We gotta fill in the client on that. And we know that we use the MSE, right? The mean square error. And if you guys remember, this is going back a couple of weeks. So I know some of you might not remember, or maybe it's your first time attending. We said that we were, during our experiments, we approached a solution where we were getting an MSE of below 10, right? And with the MSE, as you approach 0, it indicates a better model, right? You want to get as close to 0 as possible. You're not going to achieve 0, but that MSE measures essentially how much the projection versus the ground truth deviated from each other. So the smaller that number is, the better it is, right? So we want to talk about that. All right, let me bring that up here. Okay, what do you guys think? Have I misstated anything? Do you guys want to add anything? I'm especially relying on some of you who have been here for a lot of this series, right? Because again, we're telling the journey of what we've done. So what do you think? I think it's a reasonable prompt, but all of you can tell me what you think. You guys still with me? You guys want to comment on Lallman's previous statement about the third person tone towards the client? Well, remember, this is just telling the story of what we've done, right? This is telling the story of the journey. Okay, so Osama's on board with this reasonable prompt. Yassine says the switch from we created to we are using, is it all right in the second paragraph? We are using we created a reliable data pipeline. Okay, I see your point. We created a reliable data pipeline where data can be retrieved at any time. How about we modify that to what do you think about that, Yassine? Does that sit a little better with you? Let me go back while you guys think about that. Let me go back to our light. Yeah, what are some of our findings? Yeah, so including the MSC makes sense. Okay. Okay, so Yassine says, yes, I think it's better. Okay, so Yassine's on board with this. All right, guys, so let's run this prompt. So let's do that. All right, let's see what it comes up with. It's still thinking. Okay, so here we go. This is the new text. Results from the time series model. To support the time series model, establish a reliable pipeline. Anytime, integrates Yahoo Finance API to pitch data. Okay. Adopt challenge to refine our approach. We included an extensive hyperparameter search, testing 10 different hyperparameters, each range of values, tens of thousands of unique data experiments. This exhaustive search allows us to identify the best performing configuration for the model. I like that. I like the way you put that. To evaluate model performance, select the mean square error as the primary metric, and quantitatively assess the correlation between model prediction and actual outcomes. In our best performing models, we achieved an MSC of less than 10, signifying a strong alignment between the predicted values and the ground truth data. I like it. I like it. I think it did a pretty good job. What do you guys think? I think that sounds pretty good. Let me know what you guys think. I'm going to start hacking out the next prompt. So, what do we need to consider for deployment? That should be a fairly short section. We know that the code runs fast. We know that we need a modest server to run. We know that Prophet can run on CPU. It doesn't require a GPU. And that's it. That's all we and we also have the environment, right? We have a Conda environment that's fairly reasonable. So that's really all we need to do, right? So that's a pretty short section. So let me know what you guys think so far of how the document is shaping up. So Yassine says, yes, I think it's better. Okay, thank you. Osama says, I believe that ChatGPT's history prompts are the reason for this good result. Yeah, I agree, Osama. I agree. You know, that is one of the benefits of context, right? That context, in theory, helps the overall shaping of your document, right? You know, that's probably one of the underappreciated parts of LLMs in general and generative AI in general. And I have that conversation with my executive clients, right? Because it's super easy to blow off LLMs and say, well, it's just another chatbot. Well, not really, right? In addition to all of the natural language understanding and generation and the NLP stuff, one of the things that makes LLMs unique is that they keep context. Chatbots previous to this didn't really care about context, right? They were kind of dumb in that way. So yeah, I hear you, Osama. We should credit that because that definitely plays a role in the quality of the results that we get from LLMs. So yeah, I'm on board with that, Osama. All right, deployment. You guys go ahead and keep on filling up my chat. I'm going to move forward with the next prompt. We're probably getting a little bit too technical in this section because, again, you know, the executives don't necessarily need to know about Conda and the libraries and stuff like that. But, you know, not the worst thing in the world. So it's editing, it's thinking, and we should see it add to the next section here. But really, this is all we need for deployment, right? It's a modest server. It's a you know, in the greater scheme of things, it's a pretty small Conda environment. We know that the predictions run pretty fast, so you know, pretty modest, right? Pretty modest deployment, which is a plus, right? All right, so ease of deployment is the new section that it added. Time series model based on Prophet library, significant advantages in terms of deployment, great. Unlike other approaches, Prophet does not require GPU resource efficiency. It performs well on modest server equipped with only a CPU, making it a cost-effective and accessible solution. I like the way it put that. See, this is more of like the wordsmithing that I was expecting from ChatGPT. It hasn't always done this in other paragraphs, so I'm happy the way it did this. Model almost demonstrating fast execution times during all of our testing, ensuring timely insights for decision making. Additionally, we have created a Conda environment tailored for the model's deployment. Environment is lightweight, it can be set up on any server with Conda installed. As part of our deliverables, we are pleased to include the Conda environment files. This ensures your team can seamlessly deploy and maintain the model without any additional configuration complexity. That's good. That's good. I'm kind of on board with that. Anybody have any objections to this or anything that doesn't sit right? Let me know. But that is not bad. Atharva, welcome. I think it's your first time. Welcome. Atharva, we're taking a look at wrapping up our project series that we've done on creating a data science project from beginning to end. So we've always taken an AI first approach throughout all of our series. So we are currently using ChatGPT to help us write the final delivery document. So welcome, glad you're here, and feel free to contribute whatever you'd like. All right, so we got the ease of deployment. Let's go back to our guiding light. What are some of the potential risks with this product? Is there a counter argument to using this approach? And what are some of the potential benefits of this product? So guys, great time, great opportunity for participation. Start filling up my chat with these items. We've never talked about the risks behind this model, have we? This is a good time for it. What are the counter arguments for this? I have an idea for a couple, but as always, I don't like to bias the conversation. So please, start filling up my chat. What do you guys think is the counter argument for time series? What is the counter argument for profit? You know, for the not for profit money, but the library profit. Are there any holes that you guys see in our current approach? Remember, we're trying to write a persuasive argument, a persuasive document. You can't be persuasive unless you're open to the counter argument, right? So let me know. I have a couple ideas in mind. But what are some of the counter arguments for our current approach? And then what are some of the potential benefits? Let me know. Priyam says, Sir, Priyam here, I think we can always have the issue of data drift. Yeah, absolutely. But Priyam, just so that I fully understand you, how do you define data drift? People would define that in different ways. Right? So can you be a little bit more specific? What is your definition? How do you view data drift? And then if you'd like, you can also present how you counter that, right? Because remember, we're trying to present the risk, but then we're also trying to present how we address that risk or the counterpoints, right? So what do you guys think? I think Priyam's on the right track here, right? Data drift is a concern, but I want to see how you define data drift. What else is there? And remember, it's not all technical answers. What about business answers? right? I mean, just as an example of what I mean by that, what if Meta decides to stop supporting the Prophet library? That's happened, right? Companies abandon libraries, they abandon tools, they abandon APIs. Isn't that a risk? Right? What else do you guys see? I can think of a couple more. I'm putting that out there as an example to tell you guys it's not always technical. There's not always a data science answer. Be business minded. What else is there? Priyam says when the actual data scaling shifts through a significant measure. Yeah, but be more specific, Priyam. Like, what's a significant measure? What's a shift, right? Remember, we're trying to meet our audience. So how do we describe that to our audience? Joseph says maybe the risk of data degradation with time. Yep. And really, Joseph, what we're talking about there is talking about the model degradation, right? It's not the data that degrades; it's your model that degrades because it's not good for the current data landscape, right? Yassine says, I think that with the involvement of new data, the model must adapt. Yep. So Yassine, I think you're right, and we saw that in our last usage of the model. Do you guys remember how we ran into the issue where we kind of screwed up our data pipelines where we had two files and we built a model on the previous file, which meant that it was building it on old data. So keeping up with the new data is going to be something, right? If you remember, not only did we have to get new data, but we also had to rebuild the model. I don't think it's a big deal, but it makes for a good counter argument for why somebody wouldn't want to use the model. So we can include that here, right? That the model does build rebuilding, right? Joseph says, or not staying up to date due to the temporal nature of time series. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right there, Joseph. The temporal nature, or if you want to sound very sophisticated, like you know what you're doing, you would say ephemeral, right? Ephemeral is the proper word. The ephemeral nature of data in time series can be a risk. Yeah, right? Yeah, Joseph, I'm just trying to give you the view that makes you look the best. In the business, we say ephemeral. But yeah, that could be part of it, right? What else do you guys think? So if I'm using my business mind here, because remember, it's not all data science. Isn't time series backwards looking? Right? There's always backwards looking and forwards looking, right? Like, yes, we get predictions out of this, but isn't the analysis inherently backwards looking? Right? Isn't it possible that it's not enough of a leading indicator? I think that's possible, right? So it's okay to present that. It's okay to present and say, hey, look, our entire approach might be fundamentally wrong because it's backwards looking, right? So think about things like that. I mean, that's a risk, right? What else? What else do you guys have as risks? Well, you guys have come up with some good ones, right? Let me know. I'm gonna start hacking this out. But let me know in the chat what else is out there. Maybe as I hack out this prompt, it'll help come up with more ideas, right? All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is model degradation. Data landscape and the ephemeral nature of time series. The model will have to be new data to ensure consistent, accurate results. And then 2, we talked about being backwards looking versus forwards looking, right? It may or may not be a leading indicator, right? And then 3, we also talked about we've created a reliance on Meta, right? Meta is now our partner in this. So what if Meta decides that this library needs to go away, right? All right, did I capture those, guys? So 1, we're saying that it's the ephemeral nature of data, the degradation could happen. 2, we're saying that it's possible it's not even a leading indicator, right? It's too backwards looking. It doesn't create enough forward projections. That's possible. And 3, Meta is our partner now. Meta could say, hey, we no longer support this. You're on your own. That's a risk, right? So let me look at the chat again. Priam says, wait, haven't thought about it. It can happen with any model. It can. But here's the thing, Priam. I know this is your first time, so maybe you don't know this, but I think that Joseph and the other folks were right to bring this up because remember that Prophet only uses 2 columns. Date and price. That's it. That's all it uses. That's all it can use. So there is no way for us to enrich the data or give a different view or something else, right? So for our model specifically, data degradation is an even higher risk. Because if we were talking about other things where we could say, well, even if the data degrades, we could bring in sentiment analysis, we could bring in this new data from a new vendor, from a data broker, blah, 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 right? You can't do that with Prophet. It literally just uses 2 columns and you're limited to 2 columns. So it kind of makes us more sensitive in this scenario to data degradation, right? So yes, Priam, you're right. It can happen with any model, but it's like extra important with this model. Okay? So Priam, if you want to read more about that, we're using the Prophet library by Meta. You can Google that and you can see the API. It's fairly straightforward to use, but that might be like it's risk, right? That's the like the simplicity could be the Achilles heel here, right? Joseph, I love this comment. What if the goals of the business change? Yeah, that's also possible, right? It's also possible that the business will say that they want to go in a different direction, right? So let me know, guys, if you want to add that as a whole separate prompt, right? Because that's another one, right? Dej Dev? We'll call you Dev. Dev over on Twitch. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I think it's your first time. On Sundays, Dev, I usually don't take questions. You're welcome to come back Thursdays through Monday, where I take more questions or individual questions. But today we are focusing on building our project from end to end. We're doing some work in our LLM to create our final delivery document. So you're welcome to hang out and contribute as you'd like. But thanks for being here, Dev. Yassine says, I think that it's purely technical analysis of the time series. We are lacking that element of news analysis, which can say that we would have found a way to include if we had more time. Yep. That could be in the next section, Yassine, but you're right. That's another risk. Yassine says, even though we have seen it separately, I mean, we could have tried to build a model to incorporate the decision from both models. Yeah, sure. Like a hybrid model. Absolutely. Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, and again, if we're trying to sound all nice and proper, I like Yassine's mention of technical analysis. And remember, I'm not trying to teach anybody finance here, but just so you guys know here, in the world of finance, there's basically two sides. There's technical analysis, and then there's fundamental analysis, right? Technical analysis is like looking at the charts and patterns and the trends and things like that, right? Which is where time series fit, right? Time series says, hey, here's your trend, here's where we think the trend is going, right? Fundamental analysis is looking at things like the debt that the company carries, the PE ratios, who's leading the company, are the insiders selling stock or buying stock, stuff like that, right? Like, what does their balance sheet look like? That's fundamental analysis, right? So if we want to be proper about this, again, because we're serious financial professionals here, it's either fundamental analysis or technical analysis. And Yassine is right. We are looking at this completely from a technical analysis perspective. So is there an opportunity for us to include more fundamental analysis? Sure. Yeah. And that could be, I think, in the going forward section, right? It's possible that the work we've done should only be one model of hybrid models that you use, or a collection of models, and an ensemble of models. Gosh, we're learning a lot of proper words today, guys. An ensemble of models, as you would say, to create your answer, right? So yeah, Yassine's right. So Yassine, I love your thinking. Let's put that in the next section, okay? Remind me if I forget. So Priyam adds, so if we have more regressors, can't we use Sarah Max models for time series analysis and then use it for forecasting? Sure. But that requires more data. That requires more complexity, more risks. And you're still left with the same fundamental questions. You're still doing time series, right? You're just doing a different flavor of it. That doesn't mean that time series is now more forward-looking than other approaches. It could still have the same fundamental flaws, right? And also, Priyam, you have to remember that, I appreciate that it's your first time joining us. But these are the types of conversations that we had in earlier discussions, like in the ideation phase, right? Because that's where it's more appropriate to think about those things and say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to just do time series. I want to do time series with X, Y, and Z. Right? So we're a little bit in the later stages here, right? Okay, so what I want to do is I want to come back to Joseph's comment, because I think Joseph is bringing up a valid item for us to put in this section. Yassine has a valid item too, but not for this section. So let's add this. So I want to take out the finally here. I want to say 3, reliance on Meta as a third party. And down here, we're going to add that. What if they go back to using portfolios? Right? Because we cited that as a reason why we didn't choose Efficient Frontier. But to Joseph's point, what if next year the client comes back and says, yeah, you know what? We prefer for you to come up with portfolios, not individual stocks. That's a risk, right? Maybe they will come back to that and say, we made a mistake. We should have gone with portfolios. So I think this is a good place to include it. So Joseph, thanks for that contribution. I think it's an important one. All right, let's see what we can get here. So ChatGPT is thinking, it's editing. We'll go from there. It's still thinking. Which makes sense because we did give it 4 different, topics that we want to cover. All right, so here we go. Risks and considerations. Model degradation. So who suggested that? I think that was Joseph and Priyam. What do you guys think about that one? Backward looking perspective. That was my suggestion. I'm going to look at that. Reliance on meta. Anybody can comment on that. And Joseph, you suggested changing business needs. So you let me know what you think of these paragraphs. So for backward looking perspective, time series model inherently rely on historical data, which can always serve as a leading indicator. This can limit model's ability to predict future trends that are influenced by unprecedented events or novel factors. Yep. Model degradation is continuing evolving. The ephemeral nature of time series means the model is testing new data. Validation of risk and decreased accuracy and reliability over time. Yep. Reliance on meta. Excuse me. Alternative solution. Yep. Changing business. May diminish. A shift toward portfolio analysis required, which is those based on. Okay. Joseph says, I like what I see so far. Yeah, Joseph, I agree with you. I kind of like the tone it's bringing, right? I like the object. What I'm looking for here is I'm looking for objectivity, right? I'm looking for a tone of objectivity because we serve our clients best by letting them know the landscape and then they choose, right? We've talked about this. We're a technical team, not a business team. So the best we can do, the best way we serve our clients is by saying, hey, here's how we see things. I'm giving you the entire picture. You choose. What do you think, right? That's when we're serving our clients best. So I think we're doing that here, right? We're presenting that balanced view. What do you guys think? For the other people that contributed these ideas, what do you guys think? Because this is ChatGPT essentially encapsulating your ideas. But, I agree with Joseph here. I feel like we're on the right track. You guys on board with this? I love how we're chipping away at our plan, right? We laid out a plan of what we want to cover. We're still using our creative minds to come up with different views, but we're still also aided by AI to write the document, right? So any other comments before we move on here? I'm going to look at my plan here. What are some of the potential benefits of this product? I don't think we've addressed that. So let's address that. Right? So once we address that, so remember guys, we really only have 3 more things to think about. What are some of the benefits of this product, right? In other words, the business impact, right? This is what I always tell you guys, right? What is the business impact? We told them a low MSC, right? But that's not going to say anything to the accountants, to the marketing department, to the sales executives, right? And then looking to the future, what is the model maintenance required? And what can be done to grow this model? So Yassine, that's where we're going to bring in your thoughts, right? So don't let me forget that. But we only have 3 more items here to tackle, guys. So in the chat, what are some of the benefits you want to point out? Let me know. Let's start getting some of those benefits. Right? There are only 3 sections left, guys. What are the benefits? How do we maintain the model? And what are some of the things that we can build on for the next iteration or, to expand our work? Give me some ideas in the chat, guys. Why would you do this? Why would they have even asked us to build this model? What do you see as the benefits? And again, it can be a variety of things. It doesn't have to be just one benefit. Let me know in the chat. Let's start putting some of those benefits in there. Anyone want to volunteer a benefit? Some of you guys have been watching this entire series, so surely you must realize some of the benefits already, right? And you can also just think about it from a business side, right? Why would a company want this? What do you guys think? Yassine, thank you. Yassine says the model can provide accurate predictions of stock moves with confidence, which can help the company see opportunities of investments. Okay. Yassine, you're not incorrect. You're on the right track there. But what is the business impact there? Right? Like I feel like you need to go just one step further. What is the business impact there? Right? Osama says outperform the market. Yeah. But how? How? Anybody else? I mean, Osama and Yassine are on the right track, but I feel like we need to go just one step further, right? Like, what is it that takes you to that? What is it that gives you the outperformance of the market or the confidence of those predictions? right? Predicting the risks of every investment. It contributes to the alpha farming process. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you guys are right, but just give me one step further. How are you contributing to the alpha farming process? So when I think about writing these business impact statements, right? I come back to the definition of machine learning. And as I've shared with all of you before, my most basic definition of machine learning, and I think I got this from like a Google presentation or something, is machine learning is teaching a machine to do something a human can already do. Right? That's the most basic definition of machine learning. So why would you want to do that? One, automation and scale. Right? I can automate the process and I can scale it to something that to a large degree that a human can't do. Right? And then two, I'm taking the human judgment out of it. I'm creating consistent answers. Right? So yeah, Yassine sees it now. We can automate the trade operations. Yeah, right? Automation and scale. And two is the removal of the human judgment, right? If I teach an algorithm to give me an answer on data, it's going to give me the same answer on the same data over and over again, right? So these are the basics, right? Like the fundamental principles that we want to get back to, right? So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can look at more stock investments than any human possibly could. If you ask a human to forecast the price of a stock, they're going to do what? Maybe like 10 in a day? Well, this algorithm can do 10 in a minute, right? If you ask a human to do it, they're going to say, yeah, I think it might go up. And then, oh, maybe. That's them using their judgment. But if we can teach an algorithm to do it, then we're removing that judgment, right? We're going to get those same consistent answers. And you're going to get them at scale, and you're going to get them a lot faster, right? So these are the things that we need to talk about for the business impact. Right? Again, that's like the fundamental principles, right? Like this is why a company want to do this. If I'm a private equity company, again, developing that empathy, right? Developing that empathy of how the receiver is looking at this document, at this project. I, the private equity company, want this project because I don't want to evaluate 10 stocks. I want to evaluate 10,000 stocks, and I want to do it every single night within 2 hours with no human judgment. That's the business impact, right? I'm saving you a lot of money because one, we have an algorithm that we know can create pretty good predictions, and two, I'm giving it to you in a way that can completely outperform your staff because this algorithm can look at 10,000 stocks in a couple hours. Your staff can't do that. Right? Like that's the win. That's the business impact. Right? So those are the types of things I want you guys to think about. Like what is the win here from a client perspective? Because if you can get to that, you can get to the business impact. So let me know if that changes your mind for some of you guys, or maybe it creates more ideas, right? Osama says, seek areas where markets are not fully efficient. Yeah, but Osama, but humans do that too, right? They just can't do it fast, right? Or they can't do it at scale. Yassine says, yes, sir, absolutely agree. It's actually a first time to approach it this way. I mean, seeing it being approached this way. Yeah, Yassine, and again, this is one of those things that they don't teach you, right? And The college professors aren't going to teach you this because they don't know it. They don't know it themselves, right? They're academics, not business people, right? But this is exactly what I mean, guys, when I tell you, because I know I say this a lot, you got to demonstrate the business impact. So going back to those fundamental principles of, well, what the heck is machine learning, can kind of help put you on that path, right? So that's where I'm kind of going with this right now, okay? So let me start hacking out this prompt. Feel free to put more things in the chat, if this is sparking more ideas for you, right? Priya says, always sticking to the first principles. Priyam, I was intentionally avoiding using the word first principles because right now it seems like that phrase is way overused on social media. All these idiots out there, especially like the VCs for some reason, they feel very sophisticated, very like better than you when they say always go back to first principles. That's just a buzzword they're using because, somebody on CNBC said it, right? Or whatever nonsense. So I was intentionally trying to avoid using that because I think it's so cringy when people, they write, you see these posts on X, always go back to first principles. They're just dumb. They don't know it. You know what I mean? So I hate using that term, but I appreciate that that's how you recognized it. Okay. And the third item I mentioned was around removing the human judgment, right? And actually, I should say human judgment and mistakes, right? If you put a human team on this, they might make a mistake. Somebody fat fingers something in an Excel formula, and next thing you know, you've got a mistake that you're not going to find until 3 years from now, right? So that's another one. Any human judgment and mistakes. And what are these judgments? They're basically bias, right? So we remove that human bias from the investment process. Anything else? Somebody wants to add to this prompt? Let me open up that prompt again. So this is the prompt that I think encompasses our business impact. Right? Tens of thousands of potential investments. We can do it in a couple of hours, and we're removing human judgment and mistakes from what are serious investments, right? Because the equity, the private equity fund is going to be investing a lot of money, right? What do you guys think? I think this is the right track. I have a good feeling about this. Anybody else want to add things for the business impact? Last call for comments there, guys. All right, so let's go ahead and run this because I feel like it's on the right track. Priyam says, "Sir, what about human expertise?" What about it, Priyam? Let me know what angle you're looking for there. Like, how do you mean by human expertise? Before giving you an answer, I want to make sure I fully understand you, right? I'm validating my assumptions. How do you define the human expertise in here? Let me know how you're defining that, please, Priyam. So ChatGPT is thinking quite a bit here, but that's okay because we're giving a lot of items. Benefits of the model. Okay, so ChatGPT has chosen to use scalability as a word, which I think is accurate, right? Scalability, validating 10,000 models, far surpassing the capacity of a human team. This scalability ensures no potential opportunities overlooked. I like that. I like that. Speed, the model processes data quickly, enabling night evaluations of investment within just a few hours. Rapid turnaround time allows for timely and informed decision making. I like that. Elimination of human bias by automating investment evaluation process. The model removes human judgment potential errors. Ensuring purely joined data has objectivity and reliability of investment strategy. I like that. If we look at this sentence, ChatGPT took our mention of the word bias and said it enhances the objectivity and reliability. That's not bad. That's not a bad way to describe bias, right? Or why you want to remove bias, right? These benefits underscore the transformative potential of the algorithm in streamlining and enhancing your firm's investment decision-making process. Okay, so Priyam adds, a trader setting sights for a stock to shoot up or down. Yeah, but what about that, Priyam? Like, what about that? Like, what about our conversation brought that up for you? Like, let me know, like, is that something you want to include? Something you want to remove? Like, give me some detail here, okay? I'm generally on board with what ChatGPT has written for us as far as the business impact. To be clear here, right? I've mentioned to you guys that I'm speeding through some of these items just for the sake of the series, right? So what we're missing here is more quantitative results. So in the editing process, again, if we were like an actual team, you know, in real life, in the editing process here, I would want us to add some more quantitative measures, right? In some cases, the client might give you quantitative measures. So they might say, hey, look, I only have 3 analysts, and those 3 analysts we found can do a total of 30 stock evaluations a day. So we would include that. We would say, we know that your current approach has you doing 30 stocks a day. We ran some tests, some performance tests or benchmark tests, whatever, and we can do 30 evaluations in 10 minutes, which means that if you allot a runtime every night of 5 hours, in 5 hours you could do, what is that, 180 per hour? So 5 times 180. So what is that? That's 1,000, right? Yeah, let's just round up to 1,000, right? So that's what you could do. So that's something that you want to start peppering in some of those numbers and say, we know that you're at 30 evaluations a day. We can get you to 1,000 evaluations a day based on the algorithm running 5 hours, 30 evaluations every 10 minutes, so on and so on. Right? Again, not technical. Right? You don't want to say, well, because of the CPU processing on this server with these don't do that. Just say we can evaluate 30 stocks in 10 minutes. And then this is what it means for you if you want to give 5 hours every night, a processing time. So that's what's missing here, right? That I'd like for us to be a little bit more quantitative here. Maybe not in the third one, the elimination of human bias. That's a little harder to quantify. But in the other two, we could definitely be providing more numbers, okay? So I want you guys to walk away with that because, we're not doing it here, for the sake of speed, for the sake of moving along. And plus, we'd be making up the numbers anyways. But keep that in mind, okay? Priam says, the prompt is speaking about human bias. While it is true that there are a few gut feelings of a trader, the trader gets that gut feeling through expertise. Is that prompt referring to this as human bias? Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. So human bias, or the more appropriate name would be domain bias, because that's what you're describing there, right? Those gut feelings of a trader, that's known as domain bias, where you're saying, like, oh, I think IBM is going to do really good this month, so I'm going to be pro IBM, right? Or, you read a bad report, but then you have a bias of, oh, but that company usually recovers in the third quarter, so I'm going to be, really optimistic about this company. That's you using domain bias. So that's what you want to remove. That's why you would create an algorithm. Like, that's kind of like the whole purpose, right? Like, you want it to be automated and judgment-free. Now, I'm assuming that your data is also not biased, so on and so forth, right? So I'm making a couple assumptions there. But Priam, what you're describing is exactly why you incorporate algorithms. Because I want to take those gut feelings out of it. You can't quantify those gut feelings. You also can't reproduce those gut feelings, because not all gut feelings are bad, right? To your point, not all gut feelings are bad, but you can't reproduce them. What happens if that employee leaves, right? But again, if we come back to taking a more objective approach to this, the whole reason why data science, statistics, algorithms, the whole reason this whole thing exists comes down to one word. And what is that word? I've given this to you guys before, but the whole reason everything exists is variance. Life is variance, right? Numbers don't move in a straight line. Numbers go up and down. Life, not just numbers, but life has variance. So that's human bias, right? Like, how do you know that your human bias isn't just positive variance, right? Not all variance in life is negative. You could just be, running hot, right? The hot hand fallacy, right? I'm sure you guys have heard about these things, right? But how do you know that something that you're doing isn't just variance? I mean, that's kind of why we have p-values, right? That's kind of why we have z-tests, A/B testing, right? How do you know that these results, these gut feelings, these tests you ran, this study you did, how do you know it's not just positive variance? Because positive variance does happen. And then you combine the human nature aspect of it, right? Like, very, 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 very few people on the planet have the self-awareness to say, hey, wait a minute, I got a good result, but that was just positive variance. You don't say that. What do you say? Oh my God, I said IBM was going to go up and it did go up. I'm a genius. I'm a stock investing genius, right? That's what you say, right? But it's just positive variance, right? We as humans don't usually possess the self-awareness to say, hey, I kind of got lucky today. Like, yeah, I made money, but I kind of got lucky. Very few people are able to be honest with themselves in that way, right? So, Priam, that's what we're trying to remove. Because what if those gut feelings are just, just some schmuck in the trading center got lucky? That happens, right? So, like, that's why we do all this. Because variance happens, including variance in human judgment. You can't have life without variance. If variance didn't exist, none of us would have jobs, right? If everything moved linearly, statistics wouldn't exist, right? So think about that. I mean, I could talk for hours and hours about variance, right? Because variance is all around us. Variance drives life, right? But think about that. That's why you want the algorithm. Otherwise, you could be, like that saying, right? You could be a smart fool. You just don't know it. You just got lucky. But nobody ever says, hey, I kind of just got lucky. So think about that, guys. All right, so I'm on board with the benefits of the model. I think it did pretty good. Right? Okay, so let's go back to our guiding principles here, our guiding document. We got the potential benefits. Okay. So, final section. Looking to the future. What is the model maintenance required? And what can be done to grow this model? So model maintenance, we're going to do a little bit of technical, mostly keeping up with new libraries, right? Because again, remember, we're now in partnership with Meta, essentially. So what if Meta has a major release of Prophet next year? Do we have to update our code, revisit our model? Yeah, sure. Maybe Pandas will come out with a new version, right? Pandas is still growing, and we know we're using Pandas. So maybe we need to update our Pandas libraries. So that's the first part. And then the second part, we've already hit about data degradation. What is the testing schedule we're going to suggest to our client? We know we need it. We've identified it as a risk, but we haven't really said how often or made a recommendation, right? And then what can be done to grow this model? So coming back to Yassine's previous point, maybe this needs to be an ensemble model. Maybe we need to find a way to incorporate more data, right? And then that's it. We're done after that, right? So here we go. If you guys have any more thoughts, put them in the chat, but I'm going to start hacking out the prompt here. How did I put that? The maintenance and the growth of the model. It's also possible that the model will degrade over time and the accuracy will drop. We need to retest the model at particular intervals. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. Because again, nobody in school is going to talk to you about this. In a lot of cases, how often you need to revisit your model, and by the way, this is particularly when you're at a large organization, how often you need to revisit your model will be prescribed to you. You will be told what it is. You don't get to decide. And it's usually based on the criticality of the model or the business, right? It could be something that's like evaluating documents or, basic things like that. The policy might decide, well, that's not really a critical model. We can revisit that model every year. But when you're talking about like a fraud detection model or some sort of something like this, like an investment model, you could say, well, look, if the model goes bad, that's going to have a significant financial impact on us. So we're going to consider that a very critical model. So I might want to revisit that on a quarterly basis, right? Quarterly is about as frequently as I've ever heard. I don't think I've seen a model that is evaluated on a monthly basis because that's a ton of work, right? And in some cases doesn't give you enough data. So I want to incorporate that in our prompt here, right? That we recognize that this is a critical model and that we're recommending a quarterly review schedule. All right. If you guys are on board with that, let me know. But I think that makes sense based on my experience, policies that I've seen out there, models that I've written. Quarterly makes sense based on the criticality. Okay. So we've talked about meta being a potential, change. If there's like a major release, maybe we don't need to worry about minor releases, but certainly major releases you'd have to talk about. And then I think we're addressing, people like Joseph who mentioned about the degradation. So we have that, and then we're recommending a quarterly basis, right? So that's the maintenance, right? And then as far as other work, right? Oh, did I? Okay, I already sent that. I didn't mean to send that. Okay, so it's going to add that. I didn't mean to send it. I meant to add another word because we still need to add Yassine's thoughts, right? And remember, we're proper data scientists, so we're going to say that it's an ensemble of models. So we talked about sentiment analysis. And then we also talked about fundamental analysis, right? Like the traditional accounting measures, right? There's also the price to earnings ratio. Okay, so let me send that and then we'll look at the entire answer. Okay, so Joseph says, I think each day I'm falling more and more in love with statistics. Let me know what prompted that, Joseph. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a fascinating field, right? I mean, I'm really glad that I have that background. You know, it helped me look at numbers in the world in a different way. But let me know what you mean by that, Joseph. You know, because it can mean different things to different people, right? But I've said this before, that I've taken a lot of statistics courses, graduate level, blah, blah, blah. But I just love like the meta view that you have to understand that numbers don't live in a vacuum, right? Numbers are always part of something greater. They're part of a distribution. They're part of a range. They're part of, good, bad, high, low, average, right? Like there's always something to a number, right? Like you can't just take a number in a vacuum. You have to take it in the understanding of everything, right? How you create that understanding, that's the statistics approach and the applied statistics and all that stuff, right? That's kind of like where your skill comes into it. But I mean, I'm just fascinated by that, right? That it's all just like it's a number is a series of things. It's never an alone thing, right? So that's what I find fascinating. Maybe that's what you meant, Joseph. I don't know, but let me know. Or if anybody else wants to opine on that, right? I kind of went off on a little tangent there about variance because variance is very important, right? There's like a numbers aspect to it, a psychology aspect to it, an understanding that humans are terrible animals when it comes to numbers, right? But I find that fascinating. Okay, cool. So it modified it so it has 3 different items. I love the fact that it did that because it wasn't up on the screen very long. But the previous version of this future of the model section, which is our new section, only had the first 2 points, and then it went ahead and added the future enhancement point, which is great because I mistakenly sent the prompt early, right? So I'm glad that it was able to edit itself. This is fantastic. So future of the model, ensure ongoing success. It's essential plan for maintenance and adaptability. Great. Library updates, profit library. Meta may introduce a major update. Yep, that's reasonable. Model degradation. So Joseph, this was yours. So you let me know what you think. Over time, the model's accuracy may decline as it evolves. Address and recommended test model given the critical niche model in your business decisions. Model on a quarterly basis. Okay. Future enhancements, model potential into part of an ensemble approach, incorporating additional complementary model strength in decision making, integrating sentiment analysis and use order. Oh yeah, so by the way, Yassine, this is your suggestion, so let me know, right? These additional data sources provide a more comprehensive perspective. Okay. Where prompted that was whenever you mention variance, I really love how statistics helps develop a thoughtful process or methodology that you speak of. Yeah. It really does, right? Yeah, like as crazy as it sounds, right? I don't want to say I didn't understand data science, but it definitely helped me to understand the testing approach of data science when I learned a lot more about like hypothesis testing and statistics, right? Like when you start looking at stuff like that, it's like, oh yeah, I get it. Experiments, data experiments. Yeah, I get it. Right? Like, so to me, yeah, the statistics part of data science is super fascinating and super helpful. super helpful in understanding it, but also super helpful in how you use it, right? Because a lot of problems can be solved with applied statistics. Lots of them. But yeah, Joseph, it's definitely helps you like create those connections of, between the synapses in your brain, right? Like at least it did for me, where it's like, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, okay, I understand now what you mean by data experiments. Okay, cool. So if you guys want to have some fascinating reading, learn as much as you can about hypothesis testing, because that's that made things click for me. That was my experience. Okay, so Yassine, Joseph, you guys suggested some of these. What do you guys think? Library updates was like my suggestion, right? But model degradation, that was Joseph and a couple other people, I think. And then future enhancements, Yassine, this is basically your suggestion. So what do you think? Did ChatGPT encapsulate your thoughts? Like, are you okay with the client reading this, right? Because remember, we're looking at the client perspective also, right? What do you guys think? You guys on board with this? Joseph says, yeah, I like what I see so far. Okay, cool. Yassine says, I think it's great. What I love the most is that it's focusing more on showing the opportunity for improvement than the models lack. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously we want to be transparent with the client, right? We're not trying to lie here. But yes, if we focus it as an opportunity for growth, it definitely carries a different tone, right? A different message. And also, from a practical perspective, from a consulting business perspective, it opens you up for future business, right? Because you're saying, hey, look, if you think we've had a successful engagement and you'd like to work with us again, here's what we can offer you, right? And, from a business perspective, that's a good thing, right? Repeat business is a good thing, right? So yeah, I think you're right, Yassine. It presents it in a fair way. All right, let's go back to our list. Okay, guys, I think we're done. Oh wow, have we gone 3 hours? Is that correct? Oh my gosh, we've got almost 3 hours, guys. You guys are crazy. You guys are crazy. I don't know why anybody watches this. All right, guys, but I think that we have achieved everything we wanted to do in this document. We said we want to do what is the challenge, what is our general approach, what did we consider, what did we choose, and why did we choose it, right? We also said we wanted to give some of our findings. What do we need to consider for deployment? What are some of the risks, right? Because we want to present a balanced view. And then what is the counter argument, essentially what is the counter argument to using this approach? And then what are some of the benefits of this product, right? And then we said we were going to close by looking to the future. Every good document, white paper out there lets people build on your work, right? Because who knows, maybe we didn't do a good job for the client. Maybe the client wants to work with somebody else. Maybe they're going to bring in their own data scientist to their team. That's okay, right? It's still our responsibility as scientists to say, hey, look, if you want to move this forward, here's how we see it. Maybe you see it a different way, but this is what we suggest, right? And then also we've said, what can we do to maintain this, right? What do you need to do? We made a reasonable recommendation for how they should maintain the model, right? So the only thing left to do is to click on this little button up here, copy. I have a blank document in my pages, and that's it. Here's our entire document. It's it looks like it's using a markup language, right? And that's okay. It's 1,300 words. It's 3 pages which is a reasonable read for a project of this scope. Right? So this is great. This is great, guys. Good work. So here's what happens after this. You know, again, we're a technical team, so we are not authorized to actually send this to the client. This would typically go to your legal department. It might go to your project manager or some sort of product, client management person, department. The managing director usually has to sign off on this. And then it goes from and then it's usually also sent by the managing director, right? The managing director might come back to you for questions and say, hey, can you put more detail here? Or what do you mean in this section? Or can you add more quantitative numbers here, right? So you might have some of that back and forth where you're asked for more details, more information, more whatever. And then when the managing director is comfortable with it, they will send it off. From there, you would start additional discussions. The next step would most likely be to have a technical team to technical team discussion. That might involve some screen sharing or some physical installation of the code, the environment or whatnot. You kind of have like this formal handover of code where you say, okay, here's the code, and we ensured it works on your systems or whatever the case may be. Sometimes you might also have discussions around ongoing support, right? Like an SLA, a support level agreement. How are we going to support you in the future? That may or may not be the case. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It usually depends on the complexity of the project, the relationship in the project. And at that point, you're on to the next, right? You're on to the next. You have a model out there. You pat yourselves on the back, but then you move on. It's time to take on another client, another project, another model, whatever the case may be. Now, we've been walking through this one model, but it's likely that your team would have multiple models, multiple projects going at the same time. So if you were working on this, maybe you'd be moved to another model, a model that's already in flight, a model that's well under development. Or you might be moved to a maintenance task, right? There's other models that have to be maintained. Maybe you host some of these models, right? Not every client wants to host their model. They'll pay you for the hosting, right? So maybe you do that. Maybe you do some maintenance on models that your group is actively hosting, right? But either way, guys, I am really proud of all of us for coming to the end of this series, because I think that this brings us to a natural conclusion in the series. I think everyone has done a great job. I really want to thank all of you who have attended every single session, because I know there's a few of you. And if you're new, that's okay too. I have this on a playlist on my YouTube, so feel free to refer back to that. But this essentially brings us to the end of this series. I think we've hit all of the aspects that I wanted to hit in terms of effectively showing you how projects are done in the real world. So thank you so much for this series. I really appreciate the Sunday series, guys. So we're headed into the holiday season here in the US. I've promised you that there won't be a break in the Sunday series, and there won't be. Next Sunday, I think I might just do an independent tutorial. It's not going to be part of a series. It's going to be a deeper tutorial, but not necessarily part of a series. But we'll see where we end up with that. In the new year, we'll definitely start up a series. So I'm looking at a series on neural networks, and I'm also looking at a series on robotics, maybe using like the Raspberry Pi or something else, something just a little bit more fun or different or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. But really grateful that we were able to reach this series. We did 11 parts, guys. 11 parts. So if you were here for all of that, pat yourself on the back. That is not easy to do. Yassine says, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Yassine. I know you're such a great supporter. And to all of the great supporters. Osama says, I'm grateful, sir. This is more than just a project. I don't know, is it? I'm just trying to give you guys real world advice, right? So if it's more than a project for you guys, I appreciate that. But yeah, guys, I think this is the end of the series. So thank you so much. I intentionally stream on Mondays. I will be streaming again tomorrow because I leave it in case you guys have questions, or maybe you think about something overnight. You want to talk about something on Monday, let me know. Otherwise, I stream Thursdays through Monday, and you guys set the agenda for that. We've been having some great discussions. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the discussion yesterday when we talked about being better men, better people. I really liked the discussion. So keep on coming back, and just really grateful that we get to do this, right? So as always, please, lots of craziness happening in the world, many parts of the world. So please take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and I'll see you guys next time.